I mean, does she actually think she belongs here? Daniel doesn't bother lowering his voice. Like, genuinely. Does she look in the mirror and think, yes, this is the life for me? Coordinating other people's evenings? Moving their chairs? Setting their tables? Vanessa glances over at Simone with the particular sympathy of a woman who has never needed it herself. She looks comfortable at least, she says. Some people just find their level. Exactly. Daniel points at her like she said something brilliant. Exactly. And there's nothing wrong with that. I always said that about her. She had a ceiling and she was happy with it. I respect that. He takes a sip. I just couldn't stay under it with her, you know? The men around him nod. One of them laughs. Vanessa smooths the front of her dress and says nothing because she doesn't need to. The silence is agreement enough. Simone keeps her back to them. Her pen moves across her clipboard. Her face gives nothing. Welcome to Afro-Seoul Stories, Soulmates. Please like, share, and subscribe. His name is Daniel Brooks, and Simone Carter gave him 4 years of her life, which is the kind of thing that sounds like love until you're standing on the other side of it wondering where you went. They met when she was 22. She was bright and warm, and maybe too willing to believe that a man who paid close attention to you was the same as a man who loved you. Daniel paid very close attention. He noticed when her grammar slipped in front of his colleagues. He noticed when she ordered the wrong wine, laughed too loudly, wore something he considered too casual for the room. I'm just trying to help you grow, he would say, gentle, patient, like a man with a very reasonable renovation plan for a house he'd decided wasn't quite right. She was young enough to believe that love looked like that. By the time she understood it didn't, he had already taken up so much space inside her that leaving felt like removing something structural. She left anyway. That was 2 years ago. She spent a long time after putting herself back together. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just the slow, unglamorous work of remembering what her own opinions sounded like, what she actually wanted, who she was when nobody was grading her. She's not finished. Some days she still catches herself making herself smaller out of habit. But she is here. She built this. And tonight she is the most competent person in this building, and she knows it. She finishes marking the clipboard and moves to the next station. Behind her, Daniel is already talking about something else. The deal. His deal. The reason he's here tonight. It's basically confirmed. He's telling the circle around him, the confidence of a man who has decided the story before it's finished. Our numbers are the strongest. Our portfolio is exactly what they want. Honestly, I don't know why they're running the full process. It's a formality. He straightens his cuffs. By end of week, Halper and Crest is going to be very, very different. And some of us in this room are going to be celebrating. The circle responds the way circles respond to men like Daniel. Warmly, reflexively, without much examination. Vanessa squeezes his arm. You've worked so hard for this. We have, he says, and kisses her temple, and doesn't notice that she didn't include herself. The energy in the room changes before anyone can explain why. It's not a sound. It's not an entrance in any formal sense. It's more like a pressure shift, the air rearranging itself around something that has decided to occupy it. Conversation slow. Heads turn. A senior executive near the bar sets down his drink and straightens his jacket without realizing he's done it. Kong Minho walks in. He is not the tallest man in the room or the loudest or the most decorated. He's wearing a charcoal suit with no tie, moving with the unhurried certainty of someone who has never once needed a room to know he was in it. Behind him, 2 quiet assistants. Ahead of him, a wave of very important people suddenly remembering their posture. Daniel goes still. Then, okay, quietly, to himself. Okay, here we go. He straightens, touches his lapel, turns to Vanessa. Stay close. This is it. But Kong Minho does not move toward the executives. He doesn't pause for the CEO already crossing the floor to intercept him. Doesn't register the cluster of suits repositioning themselves into his path. His eyes move through the room with a calm, specific purpose, and when they find what they're looking for, they stop. They stop on Simone. On Simone, standing near the east wall with her clipboard, doing her job, not performing anything. He walks straight to her. The CEO stumbles mid-step. 2 executives exchange a look. Daniel's expression does something complicated and slow, like a man watching math he doesn't understand produce an answer he doesn't like. Minho stops in front of Simone, and his face, which has been still and unreadable since he walked in, becomes something else entirely. The stillness doesn't leave, but it warms, the way a room warms when someone finally opens the curtains. He looks at her the way a man looks at the only thing in a room that actually matters to him, which is exactly what she is, and he doesn't bother concealing it. "You didn't tell me you were working tonight," he says. His voice is low, private, meant only for her, but the room has gone quiet enough that everyone hears it anyway. Simone blinks. "It came up last minute. I didn't think. Come here." He says it gently, not a command, more like an exhale, and he closes the remaining distance between them himself and puts his hand against her cheek for just a moment. Warm, certain, the touch of a man who has done this 1,000 times and intends to do it 1,000 more. His thumb brushes just below her eye. "You looked tired when I walked in," he says quietly. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she says, and her voice has gone slightly soft in the way it only ever goes around him. "I have everything under control." "I know you do." The corner of his mouth moves. "You always do." "That's not what I asked." She looks at him for a moment. "I'm okay," she says. "I am now." Something settles in his face. He drops his hand, but doesn't step back, stays close, in the particular way he has of occupying her space like he belongs in it, because he does. "I sent your dress to the suite," he says, the exasperation returning now, fond and unhurried. "I had a whole evening planned, and you're in here managing other people's centerpieces." "It's a good event," she says, a little defensive, a little amused. "I'm sure it is. You planned it." He looks at her properly, taking her in from the pinned curls to the sensible shoes, and finds nothing lacking. His eyes say so plainly, without performance, the way he says most things. "Are you almost done?" "I have another 2 hours at least." "Then finish." Simply, no argument in it. "But come, let me introduce you first." He glances briefly, almost as an afterthought, at the room full of frozen executives who have been watching this entire exchange with their mouths slightly open. Something moves at the corner of his mouth. "Come." She takes his arm. He walks her through that room, and the room does not know how to handle it. The CEO, who spent 3 hours treating Simone like part of the furniture, is now moving toward her with both hands outstretched, his whole face rearranged into something warm and faintly desperate. The two executives who laughed at Daniel's jokes 20 minutes ago are standing very straight, very still, recalculating everything they thought they knew about the woman who fixed their lighting and redirected their waitstaff and made their evening run without a single visible hitch. Minho introduces her quietly. No announcement, no ceremony, just, "My wife, Simone," again and again, as if it is the simplest sentence in the world, which to him it is. And he stays close while he does it, his hand at the small of her back, steady and unhurried, the body language of a man who is not making a point but simply cannot help being near her. Every executive who reaches for Simone's hand gets a look from Minho that is perfectly pleasant and absolutely clear. She is not a detail. She is not a surprise. She is the whole point. "Mrs. Kong." The CEO takes her hand with both of his, and there is something almost pained in his face, the expression of a man replaying the last 4 hours and not enjoying what he finds. "We had absolutely no idea. The evening has been extraordinary. Everything has run so smoothly." "She knows," Minho says pleasantly. The lighting adjustment alone, another executive starts. "She did that too," Minho says, the same pleasant tone, and moves on. Simone keeps her composure because she has had years of practice keeping her composure. But something is happening inside her chest that she doesn't entirely have a name for yet. It is not triumph. It is something quieter and more fundamental than triumph. It is the feeling of being seen accurately in a room that had decided what she was before she walked in, and it is almost too much, and she breathes through it and keeps walking. Across the room, Daniel has not moved. He is standing exactly where he was, champagne in hand, and the circle that was laughing with him has quietly dissolved. People finding reasons to be elsewhere, other conversations suddenly requiring their attention. Vanessa is still beside him, but she has taken one small step to the side, barely perceptible, the involuntary distance of a woman reassessing her proximity to something that is no longer advantageous. Daniel watches Kong Minho walk his ex-girlfriend through the most powerful room in Los Angeles and introduce her, one by one, to every person Daniel came here tonight to impress. Minho does not look at him. Not once. Not when he passes within 10 feet of where Daniel is standing. Not when the CEO, who shook Daniel's hand earlier with professional warmth, now has his entire attention fixed on Simone with the focused sincerity of a man who understands he almost made a catastrophic social error. Not once does Kang Min-ho's eyes find Daniel Brooks, and it is the most complete erasure Daniel has ever experienced, and he feels it in every part of himself, and he cannot move. Daniel, Vanessa says quietly. He doesn't answer. Daniel. Her voice has changed. It has the careful quality of someone choosing their next words from a very short list. Did you know who she was? He still doesn't answer. She looks at him for a long moment. Then she picks up her champagne and looks away, and something between them shifts in a way that neither of them acknowledges out loud. Simone goes upstairs and changes. The dress is cobalt blue, silk, fitted at the waist and falling clean to the floor, the kind of dress that was made for exactly this body and knows it. She stands in the hotel bathroom and looks at herself for a long moment. Her curls are still pinned from work. She pulls them loose and lets them fall, thick and dark and full, around her face and her shoulders, and she looks, for a moment, exactly like who she is. A woman finally standing at full size in a life she built herself. She takes a breath. Then she walks back out. The staircase opens into the ballroom at a slight angle, which means that when Simone appears at the top of it, the room sees her before she fully sees the room. And the room. This room full of executives and investors, and people who have spent their entire careers learning to look unimpressed. The room goes quiet. Not all at once. In a wave. Starting near the bottom of the stairs and spreading outward as people follow each other's eyes and find the same thing. A woman in cobalt blue, curls loose around her shoulders, descending a staircase like she was always supposed to be at the top of it. Warm brown skin against the silk. The easy, unhurried way she moves. Not performing, not arriving. Just walking toward her husband the way she has walked toward him 100 times, like it's the most natural direction in the world. Someone near the bar actually stops mid-sentence. Min-ho is waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He watches her come down, and his face does the thing it does. That private warmth. The one that isn't for the room. Except the room gets to see it tonight and understand from it exactly what kind of man he is and exactly what this woman means to him. When she reaches him, he takes her hand and says nothing for a moment, just looks at her. I was going to say you look beautiful, he says quietly. But that doesn't cover it. Simone shakes her head, the smallest smile. Stop. No, he says simply and offers his arm. She takes it, and he leads her to the head table and pulls out her chair and leans down before she sits, his mouth near her ear, his voice low enough that only she can hear. You look like you belong everywhere, he says. Then he straightens, and the evening begins. Across the room, Daniel watches her sit down at the head table beside the most powerful man in the building, laughing softly at something he's just said, completely at ease, completely at home. The cobalt dress catches the light every time she moves. She is luminous. She has always been luminous. He just spent 4 years telling her the light was too much. He picks up his champagne and looks away. The car is dark and quiet, the city spreading gold below them as they climb into the hills. Simone looks at her hands for a moment. Then, why did you come straight to me? Before anyone. I always come straight to you, Min-ho says. That doesn't change based on who else is in the room. There were executives in there who flew in from 3 different countries to meet you. I know. He looks at her. They'll survive. She laughs a little, helplessly. Min-ho, you looked sad, he says simply. When I walked in, I saw your face before I saw anything else, and I wasn't going to stand at the other end of the room pretending I hadn't. He pauses. That was him, wasn't it? Daniel. It's not really a question. Yes, she says. I didn't know his face, but I know that look on yours. He's quiet for a moment, watching the city. What was he saying? The usual. She looks out the window. That I aim small. That some people find their level. That he spent 4 years trying to help me see myself clearly. She says it without heat, just tiredness. The script hasn't changed much. Min-ho is quiet long enough that she looks over at him. His jaw is set in the particular way it gets when he's decided something, but isn't going to be dramatic about it. You know what I think about people like that, he says finally. Tell me. They need you to be small. He says it like a diagnosis, not an accusation. It's not about you. It was never about you. A person who is genuinely secure doesn't look across a room and count other people's ceilings. He turns to her. He saw you tonight doing the work you're brilliant at, and the only response he had was to make sure the people around him knew he'd decided it wasn't impressive. Because if it's impressive, then he was wrong. And he can't be wrong. A beat. That's not someone who tried to help you grow, Simone. That's someone who needed to be taller than you. She's quiet for a moment. I spent so long believing it, she says. That I aimed small. That I wasn't built for certain rooms. And now, she looks out at the city. Her city. The one she has worked in and learned in and built something real inside of. Now I know I was the one building the room, she says, while he was standing in it telling me it wasn't impressive enough. Minho reaches over and takes her hand, presses it once, firmly. There she is, he says softly. They met in a disaster, which in retrospect is exactly right. 18 months ago, a rooftop event in Silver Lake, a power outage at 7:45, 200 seated guests, and a client locked in a bathroom who was not coming out. Simone assessed the situation in 90 seconds and started making decisions, rerouting stations, charming the building manager into a backup generator, turning a catastrophe into an adventure the guests would talk about for years. A man in a plain dark suit stood in the corner the entire time, holding a glass of water, and watched. When the last guest had gone and she finally sat down, he crossed the rooftop and stopped in front of her. You're very good at staying calm when everything is on fire, he said. She looked up at him. She was exhausted and her feet hurt, and she had nothing left for pleasantries. It's the job, she said. Half the job is fire. The other half is convincing people it isn't. He smiled. It surprised her, the realness of it. Can I buy you coffee sometime? I want to understand how your mind works. Are you pitching me something? Because I'm very tired and I will actually cry. He laughed. Genuine. Startled out of him. No, not pitching anything. Just impressed. And curious. She thought he was a vendor. She said yes because she was tired and he seemed like he meant it, and she had, slowly, been trying to say yes to things again. The coffee turned into dinner without either of them planning it. They were supposed to be done by 8. At 10:30, they were still at the table, and the restaurant was emptying around them, and neither of them had noticed. He asked her questions and listened to the answers the way people listen when they're genuinely storing information, not just waiting for their turn to speak. At one point, she said something about the event industry that she'd never said out loud before, an opinion she'd kept private for years because Daniel had a habit of finding her professional instincts naive, and Minho leaned forward slightly and said, Say more about that. She blinked. What? That thing you just said. About how clients confuse logistics with vision. Say more about it. So she did. She talked for 10 uninterrupted minutes about something she knew deeply and had been taught to second-guess. And he listened with his chin in his hand and his full attention on her face. And when she finally stopped, he said, You should write that down. That's a business philosophy. She went home and sat in her kitchen for a long time after. A man who said say more. After 4 years of a man who said less, quieter, not like that, say more was almost incomprehensible. She turned it over in her mind like something she'd found and wasn't sure she was allowed to keep. Their third date, she was running late because a vendor called with a crisis, and she showed up flustered and apologizing before she'd even sat down. I'm so sorry. I know you've been waiting. I should have called. I'm sorry. Simone. He said her name once, calm, not unkind. Sit down. She sat. Did you solve the problem? Yes, but then there's nothing to apologize for. He slid the menu toward her. You do this, by the way. Apologize for things that aren't yours to apologize for. She went still. The old version of her would have apologized for that too. Instead, she said, carefully, Someone spent a long time making me feel like existing inconveniently was something I needed to account for. He looked at her for a moment. Well, he said quietly, you don't. Not here. Not with me. She picked up the menu. Her hands weren't entirely steady. Okay, she said. Okay, he said, and picked up his own menu, and didn't make it a thing, and that was somehow the most significant part. 3 dates, and she found him on the cover of a business magazine in a dentist's waiting room. She called him from the parking lot. You didn't tell me, she said. 3 dinners, and you didn't say anything. Simone, I explained compound interest to you. I was telling you about my savings account like you were. Like I was someone who was listening, he said quietly. Because I was. I am. A pause. I didn't tell you because I wanted 1 month of being a person you liked before I became a thing you had to manage your feelings about. I was wrong not to trust you with it sooner. I'm sorry." She sat in that parking lot for a long time. Then she called him back. "You're buying dinner," she said. "Somewhere very expensive. As an apology." "Done. And you're going to let me order whatever I want without saying a single word about it." "You can order anything you want." The months that followed were the gentlest education of her life. She learned, slowly, that he was not keeping score. That when she was wrong about something he told her plainly and without satisfaction, and when she was right he said so the same way, and neither was ever used against her later. She learned that he had opinions about her that were entirely separate from whether those opinions reflected well on him. That he thought she was brilliant not because it made him look good to think so, but because he had watched her work and formed a conclusion. She learned that she could take up space around him, physical space, conversational space, emotional space, without the low-grade anxiety of a woman waiting to be told she'd taken too much. But the moment she understood something had genuinely shifted was a Sunday afternoon, for months in a furniture shop in Silver Lake that she'd dragged him to because she needed a bookshelf. She'd been looking at one, warm wood, clean lines, exactly right, and she'd said, almost to herself, "Daniel always said I had bad taste in furniture. Too maximalist," he said. She hadn't even meant to say it out loud. She'd been thinking about buying it, and the old voice had surfaced and come out of her mouth before she could stop it. Minho looked at the bookshelf, then at her. "Do you like it?" he asked. "Yes." "Does it make you happy to look at it?" "Yes." "Then Daniel," he said simply, "was wrong." He looked back at the shelf. "We'll take it. And whatever else you want. This is your home, Simone. Fill it with things that make you happy to look at them." He said it so plainly, so completely without drama, as if the idea that her taste required someone else's approval was not even worth engaging as a serious position. She bought the bookshelf. She bought 2 other things she loved that Daniel would have hated. She put them in her apartment and looked at them for a week and felt, each time, a small and durable joy that belonged entirely to her. She told him about Daniel properly on a Tuesday night on his balcony, more than she'd ever told anyone. The 4 years, the corrections, the gradual disappearing act, the woman she barely recognized by the end. He listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, without making her pain about his reaction to it. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for telling me," he said. "That's it. I'm angry," he said. "But that's mine to deal with, not yours." He looked at her. "I want you to know that nothing you described was ever true about you. That was a man telling you a story that served him. It was never the real story." "I'm still figuring out the real story," she said quietly. "I know." He tucked a curl behind her ear, easy and careful. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." He proposed on a Wednesday evening in her kitchen. No restaurant. No audience. She was mid-sentence complaining about a venue's cancellation policy, genuinely aggravated, gesturing with her coffee mug, and he said, "Marry me," quietly, and slid a ring onto the counter next to her hand. She stopped, stared at it. It was small and warm and elegant. An oval stone the color of honey in a simple gold setting. Exactly what she would have chosen if anyone had ever thought to ask her, which nobody ever had. "Right now," she said, "while I'm annoyed about deposits?" "I didn't want to wait for the right moment," he said. "I decided you were the right moment." He looked at her steadily. "I don't want a production, Simone. I want a marriage. A real one. With you, in whatever kitchen you're standing in, annoyed about whatever you're annoyed about. All of it. Every ordinary Tuesday of it." She picked up the ring, turned it in the light. "I'm not changing my name professionally." "Good. And I'm funding the business myself. No money from you. I'd be offended if you took it. And the mustard wall in my apartment stays. I know you think it's a lot. I think," he said, entirely seriously, "that the mustard wall is the best thing in that apartment, and it stays forever." She looked at him for a long moment. This man who had not once in 11 months asked her to be less than she was. Who said say more when everyone else had said less. Who bought her bookshelf without making it mean anything except that she was allowed to like things. She looked at him and she thought about all the rooms she had made herself smaller in, and how she had never once had to do that here, not even by accident, not even for a moment. She held out her hand. "Okay," she said. "Yes." The deal announcement comes 3 days after the gala. Halpern Crest is not named. Not as winner. Not as finalist. Not as anything. The partnership goes to a smaller firm nobody had been watching. And in the trade press, it's a minor surprise, and then it isn't, because the world moves on. Inside Halpern Crest, it does not move on. Daniel finds out why on a Thursday afternoon in his director's office with the door closed. It came directly from Kang's team. The director says, voice flat. Something that happened at the gala. An interaction with event staff. He pauses. Mr. Kang communicated that he doesn't build with people who disrespect others when they think no one important is watching. Daniel doesn't say anything. The event coordinator, Daniel. His wife. The silence has a quality to it. Like something falling a very long way. He drives back to the office in a kind of haze. His hands are on the wheel and his eyes are on the road and his mind is 4 hours ago, for months ago, for years ago, turning over the same sick realization from every angle. He lost the deal. Halpern Crest lost the deal. Because of a joke about ceilings made to a woman he'd spent 4 years reducing, who had gone and married a man who rearranged entire rooms around her worth. The promotion that had been all but announced goes to someone else the following week, in a memo so brief, it's almost insulting. There's no explanation Daniel can officially complain about. There never is with these things. They are careful about it, his superiors, his colleagues, all of them. Careful in the way institutions are careful when they've decided something without wanting to say it out loud. What changes is smaller and more total than any official action. It's the way a meeting room fills up and the seat beside him stays empty a beat longer than it used to. It's the way a junior analyst who used to laugh at everything Daniel said now finds reasons to look at his phone instead. It's the Friday afternoon drinks invitation that used to arrive automatically and 1 week simply doesn't. He's not excluded overtly. He's just adjusted for, factored out, treated as a variable that the calculation no longer requires. He walks into the break room one Thursday morning and 2 colleagues are talking. And when they see him, the conversation stops in the specific way conversations stop when you're the subject of them. One of them says, morning, and the other smiles, and they both find somewhere else to be within 30 seconds, and Daniel stands alone by the coffee machine understanding, with complete clarity, that he has become the cautionary tale people tell in this building. Not loudly, not cruelly, just quietly, efficiently, the way institutions dispose of liabilities, by making them feel the edges of a room they used to own. He goes back to his desk and sits down and stares at his screen and thinks about a woman with a clipboard and the way the most powerful man in the room walked past everyone who wanted something from him and went straight to her. Vanessa watches all of it. She stays longer than she should, because appearances matter to her and a broken engagement has its own kind of gossip, which she prefers to avoid. But Daniel starts doing something she cannot excuse. He pulls up the photographs from the gala on his phone. Simone in the cobalt dress, Minho beside her, both of them receiving the room with the easy authority of people who have never needed to perform it. And he looks at them when he thinks she isn't watching. He's not careful about it. He's the way people are when they've stopped being able to help themselves. She sees it 3 times before she says anything. That night, she says something while they're at home, and dinner is going cold. Put the phone down, Daniel, she says. He puts it face down on the table. Too quickly. How long have you been doing this? She says. I don't know what you. Yes, you do. Her voice is not raised. It's something worse than raised, it's precise. You've been doing it since the gala. Looking at her pictures. Reading the coverage. Obsessing over a woman you spent 4 years telling everyone wasn't impressive enough for your life. She looks at him steadily. You know what's funny? You told me so many stories about her. How you tried to fix her, improve her, elevate her. You made it sound like charity. She picks up her wine. But the only person you were actually describing was yourself. A man who needed someone underneath him so he could feel like he was on top. Vanessa. She married a man, she says, who walked into a room of 200 people who wanted something from him and went straight to her. In her work clothes. With her clipboard. She sets the glass down. And you stood there with your champagne, making jokes about her ceiling, while the most powerful person in the room was holding her face like she was something precious. Her eyes don't leave his face. That's not a woman with a small life, Daniel. That was always you. He opens his mouth. Don't. She stands. I came into this because you seemed like someone going somewhere. Someone who understood how the world worked and had the confidence to move through it. And you do understand how the world works. You just understood it wrong. You thought it was about who you stood next to and who you stood above. She picks up her bag. She understood it correctly. And she built something real. And you are standing in this apartment having lost a promotion, a deal, and half your reputation because you couldn't keep your mouth shut at a party. A pause. Precise. Final. I am not going to watch you spend the rest of your life regretting someone I was never going to be. She walks to the door. Vanessa. His voice breaks on her name. She doesn't turn around. Get some help, Daniel. Seriously. And then, with her hand on the door, I genuinely hope you figure out why you needed her to be small. Because until you do, you're going to keep doing this to people. The door opens. And you are going to keep deserving exactly what you get. The door closes. He sits at the table alone. The city moves outside the window. He doesn't eat. 6 months later, Simone Carter opens the doors of Carter and Company. Small office above a flower shop in Los Feliz. Terracotta walls. Plants in the windows. Her name on the door in letters exactly as large as they need to be. She did it herself. Her savings, a small loan. 2 years of contacts. People told her she was aiming too high to reach. Minho offered to fund it once. She said no. He said good. That was the conversation. Her first client called 2 weeks before the launch. Mr. Khan would like to book Carter and Company. For the Q3 Investor Summit, the assistant said. Full production. He says to tell you he's seen your work under pressure and you're the only person he wants. She called Minho afterward, trying to sound stern. You're being transparent, she said. I'm being a client, he said. I need someone who can run a high-stakes event without losing composure, and I know exactly one person who qualifies. Also, I believe in your business. Both are true at the same time. She couldn't argue with both being true at the same time. The summit runs flawlessly. Carter and Company runs on. 1 client, then 5, then more than she can manage alone, which is the correct kind of problem, which she solves by hiring well and building slowly and understanding that slow and intentional is not the same as small. It was never the same as small. It was always the dream, being built correctly by someone who finally knew she was allowed to have it. Daniel sees her on a Thursday evening in November. He's home early. The television is on for Company. A local business segment, emerging entrepreneurs, Los Angeles, the usual. And then the screen fills with a woman in a rust linen blazer standing outside a building with terracotta walls and her name above the door, laughing at something off camera with her whole face. Nothing held back, nothing managed, just joy. Minho steps into the frame beside her. Plain jacket, no tie. He says something in her ear. She shakes her head, still laughing. He takes her hand. The anchor says, Carter and Company's first major client was Kong International, a partnership that, according to Mrs. Kong, began with a simple question. Simone looks at the camera and says, he asked if he could buy me coffee and understand how I worked. I said yes because I was exhausted and he seemed genuine. She smiles. Turns out that was the right call. Minho, beside her, she saved an entire evening once, under pressure, without losing her composure. I figured if she could do that, she could do anything. He glances at her, and there it is, that thing his face does that is only ever for her. I was right. Daniel turns off the television. He sits in the apartment he worked a decade toward. The right address, the right furniture, the right version of a life. And the alone in it has a specific quality tonight. The quality of understanding, finally and fully, the difference between what he chose and what he lost. He didn't lose her because she wasn't enough. He lost her because he needed her to be less than she was. And she refused, quietly, and without drama, and at great personal cost. And then she went and found someone who looked at exactly what she was and said, yes. This. All of it. He thinks about the laugh on the screen. Easy. Unguarded. The laugh of a woman living at full size. He never once heard her laugh like that. That is what he gave away. That is what he'll carry. Not the deal, not the promotion, not Vanessa's last words at the door, just the simple, devastating knowledge that someone loved him genuinely. And he spent 4 years making her feel like a problem. And now she is luminous on a television screen with a man who knew better, and the room Daniel is sitting in is very quiet. And it is going to stay that way for a long time. And soulmates, that is what love looks like. Not someone correcting you in public. Not someone measuring your dreams against their ambitions. Love looks like a man who walks past everyone who wants something from him and comes straight to you. Love looks like someone who says say more when the world has been telling you to say less. Please like this video, share it with someone who deserves to be loved like that, and subscribe to Afro-Soul Stories. We'll see you in the next story.